get them out today and have them in appropriate accommodation. I mean, what you need to do is have, the Children's Commissioner go in and do it, fully investigate what's going on. And, we need to get the Commonwealth to step in, and they're the ones who should be, delivering this service, because at the moment you can see quite clearly the NT government just isn't doing it.
What's your view of actually the full transcript pretty much of what we saw in Vision last night was available since 2015 in the Children's Commission's report, so none of this is new. And what do you think about the timing of the response?
Look, none of this is new at all. Before the Children's Commissioner's report, the veto report was also done. There's been 2 investigations, and those investigations have the full transcript of that video footage that everyone saw last night. So when you have the Chief Minister and the Attorney General say that they're shocked, they can't be shocked. They had access to this report and that footage years ago.
So do you think that the Attorney General should remain the Attorney General?
No, definitely not. And I think just about everyone in the Territory is appalled by what he's been doing and lying directly to the public about it.
What do you make of the Chief Minister's assertions that there's been a long-running cover-up in the Corrections Department about these types of abuses?
There's no cover-up. They've been fully aware of what's been going on. The reports show it. The Children's Commission's report shows it. They have access to the footage. There's no cover-up. They knew about it.
At the same time, the Chief Minister said that the community really wants these kids locked up, that youth crime is a real problem in the Northern Territory.
Yeah, look, there are some youth who are high-end offenders. We're talking about a small percentage. When you look at 70% that are in there are on remand, they haven't even been sentenced to the centre. They shouldn't be there at all. So you've only got 30% that have actually been sentenced. And of that 30%, a minority are high-end offenders. Most of them are in there for low offences, and they shouldn't be in there at all. So I understand where the public's coming from, but the public needs to be informed properly.
And what about the promise to build a new detention facility?
Look, we've been asking for a new detention facility for years. We moved the adults from the old prison because it wasn't suitable for adults. It was only suitable to be bulldozed. So they moved the adults into a new prison, then moved the youth in there. Now, how do you think that's appropriate to be doing that? And we've been calling for years, you need specialised youth precinct that has wraparound services. And we've been told no, no, no. And all of a sudden, you hear it today, we're going to build one. Well, I'm sorry, this should have been done a long time ago.
The government's maintaining its insistence on changing the bail laws if it's re-elected next month. How do you think that position lines up with everything we've seen come out of the Dongdale footage in the last 24 hours?
Look, we've been calling on changes to the bail laws for a long time. That's why you have 70% of the youth in there on remand. This stuff has been asked for a very long time. None of this is new. So I don't understand why they want to, put it out to the media now and to the public. We've been asking for this for a long time. The only reason it's coming out, the public are now aware and they need to respond.
So the police say that they're going to go back to investigations they've already completed in this area and review them. Do you think the police have done a good enough job looking into these issues?
Look, I don't think the police actually had the opportunity to do that. At the end of the day, anyone in the street under mandatory reporting, if you see someone abuse verbally or physically a child, you have to report it. So when this stuff is happening inside our juvenile detention centres and not being reported, who gets held responsible for that? Do you want to ask one of these other more? Oh, God.
So what about the kids who are still in Dongdale tonight? The Corrections Commissioner today confirmed that some of those children are still being held in solitary confinement for up to 24 hours at a time. Do you think those kids should be let out now?
Yeah, look, they should be released immediately. None of them should be in confinement. At the end of the day, most of these youths that are in there come from troubled backgrounds, they have traumatic lives. And why aren't we treating them as youths and providing them with therapeutic programs to deal with their issues? By locking them up, that's not going to solve anything.
Also putting kids into solitary confinement.
Okay, please.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you just get your name and...
Yeah, Olga Hafnan, Danila Health Services. Any suggestion that you should think that it's an appropriate form of punishment to put children into solitary confinement for any period of time has got to be absolutely ludicrous. The other thing that I think has to be suspended immediately is the use of physical restraints for kids supposedly who are at risk of self-harm. I mean, that vision and that footage last night of what was done to that young boy because he was supposedly at risk of self-harm and suicide is just simply beyond belief, beyond comprehension.
So how much more damaging is it for a young detainee
Listen, common sense would tell you don't need, medical science or psychologists to tell you this is about inflicting greater trauma and harm on those children, kids who are already vulnerable and at risk. It's just simply unbelievable.
Olga, has Denard's Olga had funding pulled from services they used to provide at Dondale?
We used to provide some services out there at Dondale, but that was largely funded by Danla Dilbra ourselves. We ceased providing those services and activities because, quite frankly, those are the services that should be funded and provided by the Territory Government.
The Correction Minister's been sacked this morning. Do you think that's enough, or do other people need to lose their jobs?
I don't think it's enough just to sack, the Minister. Quite frankly, what we've called for today is for the federal government to make a move to abolish or remove the current government. Anybody that abuses their power in this kind of way have forfeited their rights to form government, in my view.
I'm Felicity Gerry, Queen's Counsel from Charles Darwin University and part of the Making Justice Work campaign. I think there's three things that I can add to what Priscilla has said, to endorse what she said, of course. But today there is a coalition of the Northern Territory Aboriginal organisations who are calling for the Northern Territory to be able to address the harm being done to Aboriginal children and their communities. So the expressions of concern today come from that coalition of Aboriginal people. What we saw on the television last night exposes what they know is happening to their children. These are the Territory's children that are being brutalised in the way that the system works and in the way that the penal system works. Secondly, the criminal lawyers of the Northern Territory have been asking and made submissions in relation to the optional protocol on the Convention Against Torture. Now, Malcolm Turnbull could sign that today, and it would mean that there would be independent oversight of every detention centre in Australia, and it beggars belief, given what we saw on the television last night, that protocol has not been signed. Independent people going into detention centres, as the wonderful Jared Sharp discovered what was going on in Dondale, would be able to hopefully see what is going on. One of the real difficulties is that only the lawyers get to see what's going on and to try and bring this to the forefront. Thank goodness that Four Corners did what they did. And the third thing for me to say is for everyone to read the expert information that is contained in the Make Justice Work campaign. The proposals in that campaign come from people who are experts in the field, who've been working at the sharp end for a very long time with the youth of the Northern Territory, and have made concrete proposals based on expert research that have been demonstrated to work in other parts of Australia and across the world that create different systems to deal with youth. So we've inherited, and I can say it because I'm English, an English system where we round children up, lock them up and brutalise them, that simply does not work. And the community of the Northern Territory, it seems to me, would rather have crime prevention and that crime never happens at all. And that's going to happen if we treat children like children and sick children like sick children, and children with mental health problems or fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, spectrum disorder, and all of the problems that we know that the children in the Northern Territory have, as in a therapeutic and holistic way with different systems that can make sure that the community is safe and the children are safe. And I think that's all matters of law. Oh, sorry.
My understanding is that under the Youth Justice Act, there are certain provisions that protect officers. So when they're in scenarios like some of the ones we saw in the video, if they're acting in good faith, they can't be held criminally liable. In your view, from what you've seen in the footage, are there any grounds for prosecution against any of those officers?
Well, as far as I could see, what I saw are genuine cruel assaults of children. And we have legislation that allows prosecuting authorities to investigate and prosecute people who brutalise and assault children. Now, if we're going to have a meaningful Royal Commission and not just a whitewash, then that's the sort of thing that ought to be considered. I don't think it's the only answer. To identify an individual that you then prosecute is not the answer. You need to absolutely change the system that exists in the Northern Territory because it is brutal and cruel. So, again, it is common sense that if children are brutalised, if unreasonable cruel conduct takes place, that's what we expect to be prosecuted as a community. That's what we expect our criminal justice system to do. But here we're talking about much, much wider issues, that we're effectively criminalising a whole generation of the Northern Territory's youth for reasons that we can't quite properly fathom. We've got a cycle of children going in and out of prison for very short sentences with homelessness, disadvantage, ill health and mental health issues. It simply cannot go on. And the sort of knee-jerk reaction, well, we'll prosecute someone and we'll have a fall guy, is the wrong reaction to have. The reaction is, well, hang on a minute, we've been saying for years, and there's certainly people from the Northern Territory for a lot longer than me who've been saying for years that this system doesn't work. And now, thanks to one television programme, there's an opportunity for government, federal, local, to stand up and say, we finally agree with all the experts in the Northern Territory and we're going to do something about it.
Would you then agree that both sides of the government should be held accountable? I mean, the ALP were, after all, in power until 2012. After this, it's come to light.
Well, my immediate reaction to that is I'm not a politician, I'm a lawyer. My view is anybody who's responsible should be held accountable. And historically, you will know a great deal more than me who is responsible for all of this politically. I think there are individuals on the ground and individuals in power that really, really need to be looked at extremely closely and very quickly. The other thing is, having a royal commission is all very well, but if it takes another 5 years to come up with a conclusion, in the meantime, you've got children in cages in a building that was condemned for adults. So we've got to do what Priscilla is suggesting and move quickly to protect the children of the Northern Territory.
Because there's another question I'd like to ask. In the Northern Territory, the people who are working in the correctional services, when they have overpassed, and we don't know if they do, how can we protect our Aboriginal children? How can we get Aboriginal people to work with that organisation or to help our people to better our people? How can we do it? Well, because, we keep on talking about it. 5 years down the track, there'll be more kids getting bashed.
Well, one of the advantages of signing the optional protocol on the Convention Against Torture or at the very least creating an independent system to monitor a detention centre is that you can have Aboriginal people involved in the independent monitoring of those centres. That you have a system.
People work in that organisation, working with children. There are, sorry to use the word, there are other people who take over that role, and that you need to work with Aboriginal people. You work with young youth. They have to be Aboriginal, but when you get other people, they don't listen to other people. And when you get these sort of things in these organisations, we need to realise we need to put our black fellas in it. And to make it work and viable, then we need our black fellas and our people to work for us.
Well, my understanding is that's part of what's been sought for years. That there is no diversity in the sort of people who are supposedly checking on, if they're checking at all, on these. I mean, what we saw on Friday night is the result of a failure in the diversity and the involvement in the community in the system, and that's why the whole system has to change, certainly in the way that Make Justice Work is suggesting, and I urge you all to at least read the minimum of the document, but also in the way that the Aboriginal Coalition is suggesting. It's not just for me to say. There are people like yourself and like the people all here asking the questions that are far more qualified than me. I can only talk about systemic change. One small example is in England, where I'm from. Recently, they've reduced the number of children in prison by 70% without a major crime wave. So there are examples in Victoria of reducing recidivism by 32% by therapeutic courts. In New South Wales by, and I've got the percentages written down somewhere, but I think it's about 20% in relation to addressing drug issues with children.
We will leave that media conference now from Darwin from the Making Justice Work Group.